Good afternoon. My name is Susan Dempsey Spurgeon, and welcome to my graduate research project. I hope you find it interesting and informative. Today I will be discussing transformational leadership and its application of techniques associated with other leadership theories, and the accompanying implications for the 21st century. This presentation is for Amberton University, course HRT 6570, Leadership and Team Development for the Winter 2018 session. The instructor is Dr. Deanna Sanchez. This presentation will encompass an introduction to provide project context. Then I will discuss transformational leadership and its nuances. Next, I will review 10 scholarly sources encompassing a brief overview of the article, its findings, and the study's conclusionary relevance to my research questions and hypothesis. And then finally, based on my literary review, I will review my conclusions and recommendations on the relationship of transformational leadership and its application of techniques associated with other leadership theories and the accompanying implications for the 21st century. Let's begin with the introduction. This presentation centers on how peer-reviewed journal and industry-recommended best practices on successful transformational change align with other leadership theory techniques. My project hypothesis is that transformational leadership strategically employs techniques from other leadership theories to effectively manage organizational change in a manner most productive to team development and success. To assess the validity of my hypothesis, I will be using a qualitative and interpretive design encompassing a holistic literary review of change management, transformational leadership, team development, and other leadership theories. Additionally, I will be addressing 3 research questions. First, what methods and strategies from other leadership theories parallel transformational leadership practices? Second, does transformational leadership incorporate and/or adapt other leadership theories techniques purposely during the organizational change process, and when are they applied in the change process? And then third, how does transformational leadership impact team effectiveness in the 21st century? Continuously evolving marketplaces require both public and private organizations to adapt in order to thrive. But how should they evolve? And at what levels does the change need to occur? In Leadership Theory and Practice, author Peter Norhaus delineates transformational leadership as the process whereby a person engages with others and creates a connection that raises the level of motivation and morality in both the leader and the follower. This type of leader is attentive to the needs and motives of followers and tries to help followers reach their fullest potential. Comparatively, transactional leadership refers to the bulk of leadership models which focus on exchanges that occur between leaders and followers and can be observed at many levels throughout all organizations. Ultimately, it comes down to what type of change does a leader want to make. Evolutionary, which is natural, unplanned modifications that occur gradually over time. Or do you intend to make revolutionary change that plays a critical role in today's organization's ability to adapt to a quickly evolving landscape and encompasses purposely planned modifications to an organization's mission, strategy, leadership, or culture? As noted in Organizational Change Theory or Practice, author W. Warner Burke notes that the majority of organizational change is transactional. But in reality, transformational and transactional change are not mutually exclusive, and an organization needs both types of change to stay relevant in today's economic environment. Transactional change is a core aspect of any business entity's continuous improvement efforts to ensure the highest quality output in the most cost-effective manner feasible. This type of change requires the attention of a portion of the organization's personnel or a phased involvement of the organizational population, while transformational change is a planned total system change in response to an event that requires the urgent consideration of all organizational members. For example, Businesses can be impacted by society-level evolutionary changes that place new pressures on organizational resources, such as shifts in societal ideology that produce mechanisms with which organizations must adapt to a new common standard of beliefs or values, like the growing concern for the environment and the automakers' need to develop more fuel-efficient vehicles. Whether transactional or transformational, organizational leaders need to be cognizant that change impacts the focus of various organizational levels differently and plan accordingly. Transformational leadership consists of 4 components: idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individual consideration. Idealized influence is closely linked with charisma and refers to a person's ability to inspire, excite, and instill a sense of pride in stakeholders while acquiring the support of a change vision and mission. A high ethical standard is an essential aspect of this measure. Accordingly, these leaders are highly respected, emulated, and credible. While they are willing to take risks, these leaders are also considered relatable, consistent, and act as role models. This feature of transformational leadership may be compartmentalized into 2 factors: attributable and behavioral components. Attributable components refer to the characteristics followers perceive a leader to have, while behavioral components relate to a follower's perception of a leader's behaviors. Inspirational motivation refers to an individual's ability to challenge subordinates' traditional way of thinking, inspire higher expectations and self-motivation, and attain a shared commitment to the organization's beliefs and mission. This feature of transformational leadership gauges a person's ability to team build, engender confidence, and communicate expectations. Intellectual stimulation relates to a leader's capacity to encourage innovation and creativity while fostering stakeholders' reassessment of existing systems, beliefs, and values. By reframing context, the leader encourages followers to think issues out themselves and explore alternative methods of doing business without fear of public reprisal or criticism. And individual consideration represents a leader's ability to treat followers individually, listen to their needs, and encourage their development through coaching, mentoring, and timely, thoughtful feedback. This leadership aspect encompasses delegating to encourage followers' personal growth and management by walking around, thus making the leader readily accessible to workers. Additionally, this element grounds the leader in the function of linchpin among organizational members, as he or she keeps everyone's focus on the mission. Professionally, I spend the majority of my time developing and acquiring funding for large-scale organizational capacity building projects that require modifications to my employer's way of doing business. Thus, throughout the course, I became interested in various leadership theories and how they aligned with my daily activities. Just because my intended output is transformational in nature did not necessarily mean my daily project management styles were not transactional in nature. But I was unable to identify scholarly resources that directly addressed my questions. So instead, I took a holistic approach, keeping in mind the nature of transformational leadership and change. I then attempted to extrapolate information from each of the articles in order to answer my research questions and determine the validity of my hypothesis. Due to time limitations, I will be focusing my comments on specific criteria related to my research questions and hypothesis. In my first study, Trait and Behavioral Theories of Leadership, an integration and meta-analytic test of their relative validity, the researchers attempted to employ an integrative trait behavioral model to assess its validity based on leader effectiveness, group performance, follower job satisfaction, and satisfaction of the leader. What they found was 31% of the variance pertaining to leader effectiveness is attributable to a leader's traits and behaviors, with the behaviors contributing more to the variance than traits. Additionally, when employing an integrative model, leadership behaviors can mediate the relationship between leadership traits and effectiveness. During this study, researchers utilized transformational as a behavioral component of leadership specific to change management. What their outcome indicated was transformational leadership was the most consistent predictor of effectiveness within the behavioral paradigm, and the most consistent trait predictor of effectiveness was conscientiousness. So does transformational leadership incorporate and/or adapt other leadership theories, techniques purposely during the organizational change process? This research indicates yes, there is a substantial relational element that overlaps both empirically and conceptually. Additionally, it does have an impact on team effectiveness by focusing on team building and placing group good over personal gain while acting in a manner that develops and encourages group respect. So does this study contribute to my hypothesis? Yes. Findings indicate distinctive leadership traits and behaviors overlap both theoretically and empirically. Additionally, conceptual distinctions and measurements attributed to transformational leadership need to be readdressed to incorporate the integration as a more than change-oriented behavior. Kazar's understanding sense-making, sense-giving in transformational change processes from the bottom up was an interesting article. The purpose of the article was to understand how sense-making, which is establishing an understanding of change, and sense-giving, which is to focus on influencing outcomes and communicating change concepts and acquiring support, occur in a bottom-up transformational change process, and how stakeholders' understanding of change occurs over time. The findings and suggestions indicated that over time change evolves. Stakeholders gain deeper, firmer understanding of change through sense-making and sense-giving. And there are three core components specific to moving institutions towards transformation. The first is depth of process, which is the level of sense-making, sense-giving embedded in people's consciousness over time. The second is breadth of engagement across various institutional levels, such as departments, divisions, campus-wide. And third, intentionally linking change activities to institutional strategies and overcoming barriers. This research indicates effective leaders must continuously adapt to the needs of followers as well as the project's place in the change process. Additionally, transformational leaders must make change not only understandable, but also meaningful, as well as leaders must encourage a deeper understanding of change in order to overcome barriers, create facilitation, and alter structure. So does transformational leadership incorporate and/or adapt other leadership theories, techniques, purposely during the organizational change process? Yes, transformational leadership needs to be situationally relevant, as well as motivate, organize, and focus follower attention. So does this article contribute to my hypothesis? Yes. This research provides critical insight into sense-making and sense-giving best practice processes that support successful transformational change and team development from mobilization to implementation. In transformational leadership and follower task performance, the role of susceptibility to positive emotions and follower positive emotions, researchers Liang and Chi attempted to assess transformational leadership from an emotional-based viewpoint and determine its impact on follower task performance. What they found was transformational leadership does have a positive impact on followers' positive emotions, and additionally, positive emotions moderate the relationship amongst followers' opinions of susceptibility to positive emotions, and transformational leadership on followers' task performance. Liang and Chi's research found that transformational leadership not only takes on a leader-centered approach, but also a follower-centered approach. The leader-centered approach is based on the concentration on leaders' emotions and behaviors that impact on follower emotions. And the follower-centered approach is related to the leader's consideration of individual follower differences. Additionally, the study provides insight into transformational leadership's overlap into the unique relationship attributable to leader-member exchange theories, as well as the connectedness and relationships identified in authentic leadership, and the positive emotions driving followers recognized in psychodynamic leadership approaches. So yes, this study contributes critical insight into transformational leadership's potential overlap into leader membership exchange theories, authentic leadership, and psychodynamic leadership approach characteristics. The Wheels of Change in Organization was an interesting study. It examined the complex physiological change management processes impacting individuals, social groups, and organizations by identifying the basic characteristics of change and their effects, as well as the cognitive limits impeding the perception of change, and determining how organizations are dealing with the change process. The authors proposed a wheel of change, which was a model for cultural change guided by 5 cultural change drivers that offers leaders guidance on effective change management based on competencies, competition, coordination, cohesion, and creativity. Mella and Colombo found that leadership requires skills in problem finding and problem solving, and the ability to identify the vital processes of every social system. In order for leaders to change an organization's culture, they must employ a 5-prong approach that addresses structure, competencies and knowledge, competition and calculation, coordination and control, cohesion and co-involvement, and creativity and courage. Additionally, transformational leadership does incorporate and/or adapt other leadership theories and techniques purposely during the organizational change process. In fact, transformational leadership, according to Mella and Colombo, needs to address 3 forms of change: operational, organizational, and cultural, cognitive, and behavioral, thus taking into account motivational drivers of followers' behaviors, similar to the psychodynamic approach, while addressing supportive and directive behaviors, similar to situational leadership, and task relationship behaviors, similar to behavioral leadership approaches. So, does this contribute to my hypothesis? Yes, this research does offer guidance on transformational leadership's connection to psychodynamic approach, situational leadership, and behavioral leadership approaches. The purpose of the general review of how different leadership styles cause transformational change efforts to be successful was to identify the role various leadership styles take when implementing successful organizational change. What the authors found were different organizational change processes necessitate different leadership styles. This study found that transformational leadership style was critical to successful change implementation. Additionally, aligning change processes with specific preferred leadership styles was the most effective method of achieving objectives. For example, during the planning phase, inspirational or commanding styles was found to be most effective. Or during the maintaining phase, logical, inspirational, or supportive styles were found to be more effective. This research on transformational change found effective leaders must be adaptive to the varying needs of workers throughout the change process, and different change processes require different leadership styles. Additionally, a culture of trust is essential in achieving organizational change. This study in particular contributes to my hypothesis. The references offer essential guidance on which leadership styles align most effectively with the change processes to ensure successful change, as well as insight into the overlap between transformational leadership and situational, authentic, adaptive, team, and servant leadership theories. In Oregon Berntson's Leadership and Employees' Reaction to Change, the Role of Leaders' Personal Attributes in Transformational Change, the researchers attempted to assess a leader's characteristics and transformational change behaviors impact on employee intentions to resist large-scale organizational change. What they found was transformational leadership behaviors affected the relationship between follower and dispositional resistance and intentions to obstruct change. Additionally, followers' resistance to organizational change is negatively correlated to a leader's transformational leadership behaviors and the openness to change values. And conversely, followers' opposition to organizational change is positively linked to a leader's dispositional resistance to change. The Oregon Bernson study found 3 areas of parallel between transformational leadership and other leadership theories. First, a leader's traits, values, and behaviors are mirrored in followers' response to organizational change. Second, employees' perspective of change has a direct impact on job-related outcomes, such as job satisfaction, turnover, and psychological well-being. And third, the impact of leadership is individualistic amongst followers. Additionally, they found a leader's behaviors and traits impact on attaining successful change. Additionally, inspirational leadership yielded the strongest effect on followers' perception of change, and the leaders need to be able to differentiate followers' orientation towards change. And finally, transformational leaders need to support an adaptive culture that incorporates a foundation of employee developmental activities. Just a quick note, my nerve damage is causing my voice to become fatigued, so if you could turn up the volume on your computer so you could hear me better throughout the rest of the presentation, I would appreciate it. Now back to the literature review. In the next study, The Role of Affect and Leadership During Organizational Change, the researchers examine the role emotions have on employee change commitment, as well as attempt to determine the long-term impact of workers' emotional experiences during organizational change. What they found was managers' transformational leadership skills correlate with followers' positive and negative affective reactions and employee commitment levels, as well as their supportive, creative, and resistant behaviors. Moreover, followers' positive or negative affective experiences at the early stages of organizational change are significantly linked to their commitment to change in the later stages, as well as their behavioral responses. And lastly, negative affect demonstrated direct long-term impact on workers' commitment to change in later phases. The outcomes of this study indicate that direct managers' transformational leadership skills and behaviors and follower initial positive or negative experiences have a powerful short-term and long-term impact on organizational change. Additionally, similar to adaptive leadership, this study indicates rather than focusing on leader characteristics or position, transformational leaders need to focus on leader behaviors intended to successfully mobilize and engage people in adaptive work by actively supporting followers' positive affective experiences and minimizing negative experiences by addressing more than just the supportive dimensions of followers' behavioral response. So does transformational leadership impact team effectiveness in the 21st century? According to this study, the followers' positive or negative experiences during the initial phase of organizational change have a significant impact on follower long-term commitment and behaviors that support change success. To maximize team effectiveness, leaders need to address all 3 dimensions of long-term behavioral response to change: which is supportiveness, resistance, and creativity. In the 8th study, the role of transformational leaders as change agents. Leveraging effects on organizational climate, researchers Schenker and Saeed attempted to define the dimensions of organizational climate, determine the relationship between organizational climate and transformational leadership styles in an array of organizational settings, and third, identify how an organization's climate influences transformational leaders. What they found were that there are 5 variables constituting organizational climate. First, trusting relationship. Second, esprit de corps. Third, team-centeredness. Fourth, goal setting freedom. And fifth, organizational power direction. Additionally, the results indicate organizational climate influences transformational leaders, and conversely, leaders influence organizational climate. This literature indicates transformational change requires a successful change strategy that takes into account the intricacies and nuances of an organization's climate. And a trusting organizational climate is founded on a leader's ability to establish trusting relationships, a feeling of camaraderie, team orientation, people's perception of their ability to establish performance goals and opportunities, and organizational power direction flows. Additionally, transformational leadership incorporates a number of techniques associated with other leadership practices, such as helping others to grow and succeed and empowering followers, which is a servant leadership technique, connected relationships and value-based behaviors, which are related to authentic leadership, and finally, the ability to mobilize people to adapt and thrive, which is an adaptive leadership technique. In analyzing roles and leadership in organizations from cognitive complexity and meaning-making perspectives, the objective was to examine the applicability of the stratified systems theory's delineation of the role and leadership of social systems with that of organizational hierarchical structures, utilizing the model of hierarchical complexity and ego development theory. The study affirmed that the complexity of leadership and roles increases with organizational level, and the levels of roles and leadership complexity ascribed by the stratified system theory and are comparable with the model of hierarchical complexity and ego development theory. Thus, the study contributes to the knowledge base of institutions as social systems with hierarchical structures. This study found that followers and leaders obtain skills with time and experience, and thus cognitive processes become more complex as people move up the organizational social structure. According to the stratified systems theory, hierarchies are necessary to deal with complex social systems that require individuals with both managerial and leadership skills. Additionally, stratified systems theory divides hierarchies into 9 stratum that encompass 3 distinct levels of leadership. They are 1. Strategic leadership, which refers to the creation of structure. 2. Organizational leadership, which refers to interpretation of structure. And then 3rd, production leadership, which refers to application of structure. This study specifically links situational, skills, and behavioral leadership approaches to transformational leadership. My final article of my review, Growing the I and the We in Transformational Leadership, the Lead, Learn, Grow model. Authors Watts and Corey present a practice-based leadership model. They also discuss the LLG model feedback from a workshop at the annual conference of the special group in coaching psychology, and then they outline the model's potential for leadership coaching. What they found is, with the increasing need for organizations to have effective leaders at all levels, the LLG model presents a framework for leadership coaching through which transformational leadership can be explored, leader-member exchange manifestations examined, and individual strengths and weaknesses assessed. This article was a unique contribution to my project. The LLG model differentiates leader-member exchange theories, unique relationship between subordinates and leaders, and servant leaderships, re-examination of traditional follower-leader roles from transformational leadership. Thus, it inherently attributes them a complementary nature that lacks exclusivity. As I mentioned earlier, because I was unable to identify scholarly resources that directly addressed my question, I had to take a holistic approach, keeping in mind the nature of transformational leadership, and then extrapolate information from each of the articles in order to answer my research questions and determine the validity of my hypothesis. Additionally, while each of the resources had limitations, none were significant enough to outweigh the knowledge value that they brought to my research project. Next, let's discuss my 3 research questions. As noted throughout my literature review, research indicates that there are a number of methods and strategies employed by other leadership theories that parallel transformational leadership practices. Pertaining to question 2, does transformational leadership incorporate and/or adapt other leadership theories techniques purposely during the organizational change process, and when are they applied in the change process? This question got tricky. In hindsight, I did not structure the question well. First, it became a bit of a chicken or the egg question. There was no way to define each theory's techniques at a level that allowed me to discern if transformational leadership incorporated and/or adapted it. But what is clear is that there are quite a few similarities between some aspects of transformational leadership and other leadership theories. For example, individual consideration, a key component of transformational leadership, grounds the leader in a function of linchpin among organizational members, as he or she keeps everyone's focus on the mission. Well, in the team leadership model, the leader focuses on helping the team achieve effectiveness. And finally, my 3rd research question: how does transformational leadership impact team effectiveness in the 21st century? Transformational leadership addresses cognitive, behavioral, and emotional aspects of teamwork by instilling a common goal and sense of pride while challenging followers, maintaining high expectations, and instilling a shared commitment. Transformational leaders challenge followers to find ways to do things better while at the same time treating each person individually. There is a reason transformational leadership has a direct impact on positive emotions and was the most consistent predictor of effectiveness. Finally, let's determine if my hypothesis is correct. As with research question 2, in hindsight, I would have structured my hypothesis differently to more clearly identify my intended purpose of the question. I was unable to clearly determine if a technique was attributable to one leadership approach versus another. But what I was able to discern is that research clearly notes that characteristics of transformational leadership are associated with other leadership theories, such as the unique leader-follower relationships attributable to leader-member exchange theories, or the need for leaders to be situationally relevant, as well as motivate, organize, and focus follower attention, which is associated with adaptive leadership. And finally, transformational leadership behaviors were repeatedly noted as the most effective method of managing organizational change and maximizing team productivity and development. The final component of my graduate research project is recommendations. Because it is clearly evident that leadership theories are diverse in nature and thus can cause some confusion, my 2 recommendations are that researchers work to enhance, expand, and potentially clarify leadership approaches in the context of the 21st century. For example, as with stratified systems theory, potentially various leadership theories may be more applicable based on the hierarchical demands placed on a leader's cognitive processes. And then my second recommendation would be that more research be conducted comparing and contrasting leadership theories so we are better able to discern the similarities and differences in techniques applied based on a common agreed upon group of characteristics. This is the end of my graduate research project. I want to thank you for your time, attention, and I appreciate you watching my video. Thank you.